All right, we got Michael Middleton on today from San Diego, California. We're going to talk about Bitcoin, and we're going to talk a little bit about Craig Wright, the identity of Satoshi Nakamoto, and we're going to just let this go as a go where it goes. I reached out to Michael from Twitter, from prior YouTube videos that I did, and invited him on to share his story, and we can kind of open up a discussion about Bitcoin and Bitcoin Satoshi vision. And so that's where we're going to go with it. So Michael's from San Diego. Michael, pleased to meet you.
It's pleased to meet you too. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, and did you want to share your do you have something to share with your screen that you'd like to
I do. So let's see if I can get that going here.
give us a little background on what
So
what
this is one of the first purchases I've ever made with my Bitcoin, specifically my BSV, Bitcoin Satoshi Vision.
All right, looks like a coffee mug or
Yes, sir.
a water mug, and you pour the hot water into it, and then the hot water changes. It looks like it's changing it's going from black into Satoshi Nakamoto, and then you got a picture of a guy here who looks to be Craig Wright.
So I bought this, I think it was back in late 2018 or early 2019, after being involved in Bitcoin. So let me come back to where we were. So I got into Bitcoin originally probably in late 2012, early 2013.
And how did you find out about it?
So I was surfing the web. So I have my own firm here in San Diego.
What type of firm?
It's a property tax consulting firm. We're actually one of the largest property tax consulting firms in the state of California. The company's called ProTax LLC, PROTAX LLC. I founded it in 1990, and we represent all kinds of high-end residential and commercial. And I think in all the years since it's been 33 years, we've represented about 35,000 different properties in the state. And we've gotten probably 20-some billion dollars in assessed value reductions, saving our clients literally hundreds of millions of dollars. So that's my personal background before I found Bitcoin. Okay. And I was in computers for years. I sold computers. So that's part of the reason I've been so able to understand what's going on in Bitcoin, is because I have a computer background that started way back in the 80s with PCs. You know, when they started networking PCs together, I sold them. And so I understood like the whole block size debate with megabytes. I instinctively knew larger blocks made more sense than smaller blocks. You know, if you've got a freeway, you want it to be an 8-lane freeway, not a little 1 lane for donkeys.
So back to the surfing the web at the tax firm, and you're doing the tax, and you're really minding your own business, and you're surfing the web back in what year?
It was 2000, I think it was late 2012 or early 2013, and I came across a video, and there was a gentleman in Russia, and he said he was going to transfer money from Russia to the United States, 100 grand. He was going to do it electronically without a bank, you know, and without any hassle. Well, he got my attention. So he did it. And I've been looking for that video. I haven't been able to find it. But I called my brother in, who was my partner at the time, and said, this right here, whatever this is, it was called Bitcoin, is going to change the world. And my brother's a CPA, just to give you an idea, kind of have a smart family. And so my brother, when he took his CPA license back in the 80s, I think 70,000 people sat for it. And he got #1 in the nation, got a gold medal award.
Top score.
Top score in the nation, yeah. And so he was my partner here for years up until recently. Now I'm back 100% owner of the firm. So in 2013, I came across that video, and that changed my life. And so my first attempt to acquire Bitcoin was actually downloading the entire blockchain. And the price at that time was less than $1. And so I didn't actually start acquiring Bitcoin until late 2014, early 2015. And I did it through an exchange rather than mining, even though I looked at mining. There was an exchange called Bitstamp, if you're familiar with it.
Heard of it.
I think they're out of Holland or something. And so I did all the KYC. I've always complied with all the tax laws, not only with my business, but with, my cryptos.
As
Even
a tax guy, that makes sense.
yes, and also, I believe, if you don't like the laws of where you're at, you change them. You don't go against them. Not to say that I never have, because we all do things, but that's just my personal belief is you try to change the system rather than come up against it.
That's the power we have with the legislature, right? That's the
Right.
Constitution.
And that's one of the things that I've been a constitutional studyist for years. I've read all the Federalist Papers. I was very familiar with all of the founding fathers. And then in my business in property tax, I became an expert in the code. In my business, I actually
Title 26 or the state or Title 26?
It's called the Revenue and Taxation
Yeah.
Code of the state of California.
Oh, the state of California one. Okay.
Yeah, specifically how it relates to property taxes. And so I became an expert in the code and understanding the code. And in 2017, 18, I was part of a group called the California Alliance for Taxpayer Advocates. And I was one of its founders. And we actually went in front of the senators and the State Board of Equalization, which eventually led to law changes that benefited all property taxpayers in the state of California. So I won like an award for that.
Mm.
So I've been very successful in that. And so
sounds like people who are deal with these property tax issues, man, you really need to reach out to you. This is like you're a savior to the people in reducing their tax burden. It sounds like property.
Yeah, and what I've done is because I did direct mail campaigns when I was a salesperson for minis, mainframes, and then network PCs. I've always gone after the clients rather than advertise because I specialize in commercial property and high-end residential. So I didn't really want to be contacted by your average person with a $300,000 home because I couldn't really do much. It didn't make sense. So I never really put a lot of advertisement out there. I did specific direct mail campaign, which was very successful in acquiring my clients. And now we get word of mouth as well.
Well, I have some questions about property tax for you that I'd like to ask about, but I'd like to table that for another video if we could, because it would be probably rather extremely lengthy. And
Okay.
With your subject matter expert, I can imagine that we would go on for a long time. So
yeah. I would be very good. I'm probably, well, of all the property tax consulting firms, my firm is the largest independent firm. There's some larger ones that, are nationwide or some are worldwide, and they handle the huge $150 million corporate complexes. We specialize in the $2 million to the $60 million properties. Your chains, your car washes. I mean, we've done just about every kind of property you could imagine. But you're right. Let's move on.
I have a couple questions I already have in mind, but I'm going to reserve those because for another video, podcast. All right. So yeah, back to the Bitcoin. You found in 2013, you bought it in 2014 from this exchange.
Yes.
And then, you sat on it, or did you do anything with it?
So what I did is I watched it for years, and then I did dollar cost average buying. So when I first bought it, it was like $500 or $600 per coin, and then it went up, and then it went way down. And when it started going down to like 250, I really bought aggressive. And so, I never reveal the kind of amount that I bought, but I was very wealthy from my property tax work. And so I had a lot. So I put a small percentage of what I owned at the time, but I owned a lot. So, I put less than 5% in, but it still got me a lot of Bitcoin. And I sat on it for years, and I watched it, and I researched because my business was doing so well. All of 17, I actually got into researching, and I also became hugely involved in Ethereum and all the ERC20 tokens. I followed Cliff High, if you know who he is.
Oh yeah, I've read every single one of the Alto reports. I was a subscriber when they started coming out, and starting in 15 and 16, I started subscribing. So
okay, you and I followed. So in 17, I went crazy with the Ethereum. Also,
ICOs.
Daniel Krawisz.
I'm going to have him on Friday.
I saw that. I actually met him in person down at Acapulco. I've gone to 2 conferences down.
Who is Daniel Krawisz exactly? Give me
Daniel is I guess a YouTuber that really understood Bitcoin early on. He's got the deer, and he's a genius in my opinion. But he was kind of little known. So Daniel was one of the first of about 8 or 9 YouTubers that I watched that really understood Bitcoin, because most people, and I was one of them, who originally fell for the segregated witness argument, right? But once I eventually, and I met Roger Ver in person. So I was definitely a follower of Roger Ver and Bitcoin Cash. And then I met Roger Ver down at one of the conventions in Anarchapulco.
So just okay. I'm not sure how, there's such history here. Okay,
Yeah.
but finish up on Daniel Krawisz really quick for me,
Yes.
just for people to know who he is for Friday,
Yes.
and then I want to ask you about this 2017 period. So
Okay.
what yeah, Daniel Krawisz, he's a subject matter expert. It sounds like.
Yes. And what he does is he's very creative with his stuff. If you've watched his cartoons over time, he's kind of he's esoteric. But when I started watching him and I saw that he was into the uh, Bitcoin, the big blocks before that came around, I really enjoyed his stuff. He's got the blue unicorn, and the size of the unicorns all matter, and it all made sense. So I met him. I think it was in 17 or 18. He was giving a presentation down in Acapulco, and I followed him ever since. So I think he's a gem in the space. I'm not surprised you found him.
Nice. I'm looking forward to meeting him and learning and discussing hyper Bitcoinization and the entire
Yep.
how this thing applies, how this concept applies to the different chains. And there's a lot of technical questions that I have that I really want to learn about from him. So, okay, so back to 2017, you met Roger Ver. You're following the entire the debate. They call the block size debate,
Oh,
and
I
then
was all involved in that. I watched people like Adrian Antonopoulos when Bitcoin first came out, the
yeah.
whole thing about the pyramids and the proof of work and all that. And my background was because I was so understood of computers, and larger is better with megabytes. I used to sell um, memory boards for mainframes. For a 4 megabyte memory board, I sold it for $17,600. And I sold for minis and mainframe companies and software. So I really understand software. So I created my own software program here for my company. Um, so and I knew that software was going to kind of eat the world, take over the world. So when that whole debate came in, and I met Roger Ver, um, and he gave a speech, and I actually approached him afterwards and we spoke. And I asked him a couple questions, and his answer was kind of took me back, because I asked him some opinion, and he says, all I can tell you is you have to think for yourself. And I said, well, Roger, I always do, but thank you very much. So I kind of left the meeting him a little bit off put. And then when the war came out between Bitcoin Cash and BSV, because I'd already converted a bunch of my original BTC, because the split, you get both, but then you can convert some. So I converted some to Bitcoin Cash, but then I came across Craig Wright. And all I had to do was watch a couple videos. He did a specific one down in, I think it was Colombia, about people, fishermen, and it was so clear that he knew. So I started researching Craig Wright. So I actually researched his original tulip trading lawsuit. I got the documents out, I read it all, and I was convinced that he was Craig Wright early on. And now over time, it's proven to be, I'm almost like 99.9% that, because I've researched, and everything you're seeing now, I've already researched all that and believe it to be true.
Mhm. Fascinating. So it sounds like the whole Roger Ver thing was very convincing, but there was something missing, and then all of a sudden you met Craig Wright and then the
Yeah,
BSV.
here's where Roger went wrong. See, I was down in Anarchapulco. It was an anarchy meeting, and so I was kind of in a feeling of, yeah, it should be our money. We should be anarchists. Well, when Craig Wright pointed out that anarchy was the second tenet of communism, I said, wait a minute. Anarchy is not the way to go. You have to have rule of law. And so then I realized that Roger Ver, who did time in prison for apparently firecrackers but whatever he did to get there, Craig Wright says, well, he was making bombs or selling them on the internet. So, but he did time in prison, which allowed him to learn about money and cigarettes and how anything can be used for money. So, and I've done a lot of personal classes for my family, my employees, my children about money, gold, silver, what really money is, and how Bitcoin is the next evolution of money because it brings in the concept of scarcity. And then, of course, the number 0 and infinity. All that plays into where Bitcoin comes in my opinion.
All right. So now let's go, okay. So you bring us some really good points. Now let's go into like the, back to the original white paper, and you're talking about the 3 forks. And we got 3 different Bitcoins, BTC,
Yes.
Bitcoin Cash, and then BSV, which is now, as of 2018, at the end of it, the 3 forks are there.
Yeah.
So, with your studies and research in the white paper and the backgrounds, are you, it's clear. So the white paper talked about the duty of the miners, and then the miners to create to be honest nodes. It's actually pays them more to be honest nodes. So we haven't really had too many problems with that. But what about this duty of the developers, and the developers to have had these instructions to stick to, and then some of the developers have gone in a completely different direction.
Yes, and that's a really good thing because I sold software, right? And so there's application software, right? And then there's baseline software. You have to have a stable protocol, and I've always known that. The HTTP/IP protocol was not the best protocol of the time, but it's what was used, and because it stayed stable, right? We now have an internet. And I also knew there was a little spot in there that we could eventually use cash one day. And Craig Wright identified that and says, so he uses that for cash micropayments. It was already created in the HTTP/IP protocol, and now we have IPv6 and IPv4. IPv4 has been all over the world, but IPv6 will allow all the new computers to communicate with each other using that little protocol that's in the HTTP/IP protocol. And I learned all about this because I sold computers and I sold systems.
In the 90s?
In the 90s, yeah, late 80s, early 90s.
Wow. So you were selling software and computers at before the birth of the internet, or like this is around the birth? I mean, when
around the birth, as a matter of fact, I started my company in 1990 after I sold and did very well selling computer systems. And then the reason I left selling is I didn't like the credibility gap between what my company could deliver and what the client expected, which was part of the client expectations are my job as the salesman. What the company can deliver is here. If that gap grows too big, it becomes a problem. And I just, in good conscience, couldn't sell someone else's software if it wasn't going to do what I thought. So I started looking for something else. And in Entrepreneur Magazine, I found property tax consulting. Well, I used to be in sales of commercial property with my father. So I got into property tax consulting because it was something I could control. And so the internet came around after I started the company. And because I was so into that, I poured right into the internet. So my company had one of the original websites for property tax consulting.
All right, you make a really good point here about, and your experience is invaluable. So about how there was, and you said it was HTTP protocol on the internet, and that was not
HTTP/IP. It was the original protocol.
It wasn't the best. You're saying there were others?
Yes.
What were some others?
To be honest, I don't even remember because I was just young.
Yeah.
But I remember Craig Wright talks a lot about this because the man, I mean, then I also researched, he got 20-some degrees and an IQ of 180?
Yeah, I mean, so, but back to this is an important correlation. You got HTTP, it wasn't necessarily the best, but it became stable.
It's kind of like Betamax and VHS. I think Beta was actually better than VHS, but VHS became more acceptable, and then Beta was done. And then they both got intermediated by discs, and now streaming and is gone. So you never know what's going to happen quickly, but HTTP/IP became accepted, and now no one messes with it. That's why we can communicate right now.
Because it's a stable protocol and has been for all this time?
Yes.
All right. So then if we go back to the white paper sets out a does it set out a stable protocol in the white paper as to how it's supposed to be?
Absolutely. And so here's the interesting thing, and this is where my personal life intersects with BSV and Bitcoin. So I had a personal tragedy in 2019. And it was I was involved in a head-on automobile accident, and I suffered. I was in a coma and suffered a brain injury. You would hardly know it, but if you look closely, you could see the scar. It kind of
Yeah.
I got nasty pictures that I don't really share. So because of that, I was taken out of the equation from being able to think because I was actually functionally like a 3 or 4 year old child for a number of years. And it was unfortunately alcohol related too. So I'm a recovering alcoholic for like 4 or 5 years now. And for years, no one even knew. So, we all have our demons, and that was my demon. And so I've recovered that. So the reason I bring that up is on February 4th of 2020. That is the date that the Genesis upgrade of the Bitcoin protocol was finalized. Okay, so that's a huge date for BSV and Bitcoin.
Well, okay. What is the Genesis update?
So what happened is after the Bitcoin Cash split into BSV and BCH, because Craig Wright wanted to restore the opcodes, he didn't want block size limits. He wanted to restore the protocol that the developers that you mentioned had changed by cutting the signatures and taking out the opcodes and making it 7 transactions a second. He wanted to restore all that. So Roger and Craig Wright were on the same team when it split from BTC to BCH, but when later on they obviously went in separate directions, and that's when I found Craig Wright, and that's when I realized I was on Craig Wright's way of thinking more than Roger's way of thinking. And on February 4th of 2020 is when BSV reestablished the original protocol, and they called it the Genesis upgrade. So if you go back and research that, you'll see that. And that's when I knew that big blocks, and Craig Wright would say, it's just going to grow and we're going to scale from here. Well, look where we're at today.
Okay, so it wasn't necessarily when BSV first came into view back in 2018. It was February 2nd, 2020 when they became
February 4th of 2020 when
February
they
4th.
completed the Genesis upgrade. And I'll be honest with you, that was the day where I actually was sentenced myself, because in my accident, there was other people that were injured. So
That's an important date in your life.
It was a huge day. So it was my own personal Genesis, because I had to atone or account for my
For your own
my own
demons.
transgressions. Yes.
Wow. All right. So this is powerful. Now let's back to where are we going with this whole with Bitcoin right now? It sounds like your background is like just right on point. I mean, it lines up with all this stuff so impeccably. I'm honored to really get to know you better. So I think people get a lot of value out of this. So let's just talk about where we're going with this. And
Okay.
you mentioned the big blocks. There's all the Terra node has been talked about. I mean, what are the court case? I mean, it's coming up, but there's other variabilities. I mean, where are we going with this thing?
So this is my opinion, and it goes to in one of your recent blogs, I saw that you have gotten into spirituality and eating right and all that. Well, I've always been that way. And the reason I've been that way, and the reason I'm so excited about where Bitcoin's going, is because my spiritual foundation is on a book that I read at age 17. It's a 1,000-page book, and it's called Thinking and Destiny. And it was written by a gentleman by the name of Harold Waldwin Percival. And it's basically a user manual for life. The first chapter says it's the purpose and plan of the universe, why we're here. And it kind of explains most of the other religions, like Christianity, Buddhism, all of this stuff. And it talks about truth and going inside, that the kingdom of heaven is within. As you know, I'm very much Christian type following person doing the right thing. And that's been my philosophy my whole life. So when Bitcoin came along and I discovered Bitcoin, to me, it was the truth machine that could potentially save the world. So when Craig Wright started talking about we bring honesty not only to people, but to governments, it kind of forces governments over time to deal with honesty. And when he started talking about if you're walking down the street and you take a video and someone's harming someone else, that's evidence in a court of law. And once you put that on the blockchain,
No
that's
censorship.
no censorship. And so then, the first block has what Craig Wright put on there, when the banks collapsed or whatever in '08. So, and now we see that it's an open ledger. It's not a cryptocurrency. It's a ledger. It's an immutable public documentation of everything that's going to happen. So where are we going? That's where we're going. And he says, it's plumbing for the world. Get out and build.
Plumbing for the world, get out and build. This is the big picture view of where we're going with this, right? The bit.
Yes.
So that's going to be the bit side of the coin. You got the bit side, and then the coin side. Bit. People know about the coin side, digital, like money. They
Yes.
could always recognize with that. But you're talking about the other side, the bit side, which is the data, the big data portion, the
Yes.
plumbing for the world, which
Yes.
he's talked about how it's the future of everything. Bitcoin is the future of everything. It's what do you mean future of everything?
So
It's
here's
like,
something I wrote. This is a word I created years ago. Okay, you ready? The word
ready.
is bit conscious. The knowledge that Bitcoin will usher in a new age of enlightenment, where individuals known as illuminees will become a bit more conscious of consciousness and bring forth a real democracy where each person practices the art of self-control and self-discipline. That is the word bit conscious that I created. I'm going to put that eventually on my website and everything, but I have been a little bit detoured these last few years.
Or here's the plug for Slicktionary. Have you looked into that? That would be a
No,
great. Oh, you got to look into that. That word right there. It's a where you own the. It's built on Bitcoin, and you actually own. You come up with a word, or you write a word, and you actually buy that word and that for a few cents, and you own it. So it's like the new dictionary on Bitcoin.
nice. So along those lines, I had hand cash, I had cent B, I had Relay X. I mean, I put a little bit on all that stuff. I was on all the exchanges in addition to Gemini and Kraken. I was on KuCoin, Huobi. I mean, all those are no, you can't do anything anymore. By the way, in your video the other day, you said, how can you buy BSV now?
Yeah.
I figured that out now.
Share it. Well, please.
Okay.
Well,
So the way
what do
I
you?
was able to do it recently, it's called mycoinify.com.
MyCoinify.
MyCoinify, and I found it by going to the BSV site, which is what is it? Cent or
The one off CoinGeek.
Coin. Thank you, CoinGeek.
Yeah.
Every once in a while with the brain, I still lose it a little bit. CoinGeek, and so I found it, and I've been hacked. And I think I mentioned to you, I also testified with the SEC on one of the
Oh, and
coins.
Veritasium.
Veritasium.
Now, did you participate in the Veritasium ICO?
No, I just missed it. And so I reached out to Reggie Middleton directly, who has the same last name but is no relation. And we did some email correspondence. And I actually acquired it directly from him for Bitcoin.
So this was okay. This is a really fascinating subject that I don't think a lot of people know about. But Veritasium, they actually hold a patent, and is it two patents?
Three.
Three patents.
They own two in Japan that I know of, and one in the United States. As a matter of fact, the one in the United States, I think it's for DeFi technology. So I don't know how it corresponds to the treasure trove of patents that Enchain and Craig Wright owns. But I know that he just recently had a very favorable ruling that Coinbase is not going to be allowed to challenge his patent anymore in a court of law.
Veritasium is definitely some sort of a unicorn. I mean, that was what what Cliff High always talked about, right?
And
He
that's
always
where,
said,
since I missed it, I reached out to Reggie Middleton. We had several email correspondences, and the only price, it was on a exchange called Ether Delta, which is, you
"Oh,
think,
I remember using Ether Delta. What an
yes,
experience that thing was." Right? I mean, I'm with you, but I participated in almost all those ICOs with Cliff High. I
yeah,
think everyone I could get my hands on from me, and most of it was all Ether Delta. That's how you'd buy
yeah,
them.
Ether Delta. But then I started doing it through um, some of the other ones because I was on, KuCoin and of course Gemini. For me, Gemini was a great company. It allowed me to get the Ethereum. So one of the first ones I
Yeah.
participated in was Populous. Do you remember that one?
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Uh,
had Populous. Yep, that was another Veritasium Cliff High, call.
oh yeah, and so I got as many as I could. A lot of them weren't open to Americans, so I just bypassed them. But so I'm still sitting on a bunch of them. I've actually sold a bunch. One of the best sales I ever made was, matter of fact, let me just,
Play. Okay, yeah. It looks like a Dogecoin or Shiba, or you
yeah,
said
okay.
Doge.
So the reason I'm gonna share this story. So I was on Kraken and Gemini, and I had, I don't know, around $7,000 or so left over, which is a significant amount of money, right? But I didn't know what to do with it, and I thought, what else do they offer other than Bitcoin? And I came across Dogecoin. I said, what is that? Doggy coin? So I looked at it, and it had the Bitcoin protocol and a meme of a dog. And I said, that's interesting. So I said, I'm going to buy some. So I bought everything. I just said, put that all in it. And I got literally 2.25 million tokens. And years later, when I was incarcerated and couldn't do anything, I had an IT guy and he sold 2/3 of them. And I went 100x on my original investment, and I still kept a third behind.
Wow.
So I've made and lost a lot. Like when you talk about, I mean, I've watched you with all the mistakes you made and
Yeah, you
oh,
may.
I can't tell you the amount of hacks that I've had being in the airport and just bad decisions. And
Oh
Populous was worth millions at one point if you take the high point, which you never get out at the high point. Um, but I didn't sell any of it. So
no.
now it's down to less than what I paid for it. So
Yeah. Yeah, you win some, you lose some. That's why this whole Bitcoin space is so important, because I mean that it's a high risk. I mean, if you want to participate in that stuff, it's very high risk. Yeah, high reward, but high risk. So
not your keys, not your money. That's the way I always saw it.
yeah.
So I always took
So
my stuff off the exchange if I could.
where are we going though with the Bitcoin space? Because I mean, that's really, it's like if you have. The other day, I talked a little bit about how just everybody should just own one
Yes.
Bitcoin SV.
Yes.
It's 100 million Satoshis in one. Isn't that right? It's 100
So if
million.
there's 100 million Satoshis in every Bitcoin, how many Bitcoin would you have to become quote unquote a trillionaire? So a trillionaire is someone who has what? A trillion something. I could have a trillion ducks and be a duck trillionaire. I could have a trillion cells and be a cell trillionaire, which we probably most of us are. I could have $1 trillion and be a dollar trillionaire. So to own a trillion Satoshis, if there's 100 million Satoshis in every Bitcoin, you would need 10,000 Bitcoin to be a trillionaire in Satoshis.
So that's the number. 10,000 Bitcoin is what you would need to become a trillionaire in Satoshis.
So which Bitcoin is real and how much is it worth? Right? I guess we're now up to BSV was down around $35, and what, over the last week and a half, it shot up to 112. Now I think we're down around 90, 80, wherever we're at. One thing I learned from Craig Wright, price is important, but it's not the purpose of it. It's, eventually I think we're all going to be, where are we going? I think we're all going to be dealing in Satoshis.
Okay, so you do think that we will be going into that era where we're dealing in Satoshis. Now, being in the finance background and taxes, I don't know if you can talk about this or not, but if you can't stop me, but I mean, is it possible that, I mean, I'd just like to share the story that, like, if it were 10, 15 years ago, at where I would never personally have been even interested in looking at this sort of thing.
Right.
The economy was different, and
Right.
my understanding of money was different. I would have just said, no thanks. But now it seems like with inflation and the uncertainties about banks. A good friend of mine, he's part of the Bitcoin space developer. We're on a meeting with Jack Pitts earlier last year, or earlier, yeah, in 2023. He gets off the meeting with me. He says, my bank just closed down. They shut down. They closed the door. Silicon Valley Bank. I mean, literally, I was on the thing when it happened, and the white panic set in his
Oh,
face.
yeah.
And so, I mean, with the uncertainty about what's going on, I mean, that was a strong bank. He was invested in. He had 100% confidence in.
Right.
That happened overnight. So,
Well, remember the 30s, the banks were failing like crazy. And at that point in time, if you owned a let's say a roll of silver quarters, you could get yourself the car of the day, which was the Edsel. So there's pictures of where guys were trading a roll of silver quarters to get an Edsel.
hmm,
So remember, real money is real money. Silver, gold, that's constitutionally defined. And so that's one of the things Reggie Middleton was doing when they shut him down, is he was doing silver and gold tokenization on Veritasium. And that's, and by the way, that's one of the things I did is I produced the documents and interviewed with the SEC after my accident. And they basically, the SEC, Reggie's lawyers gave me a bunch of questions, which I answered all for like 20, 30 minutes. The SEC only asked me 2 questions. And
do
when
you
they
remember?
realized, yeah, because what they're trying to do was say that, that it was an investment and everything. But Reggie in the email said, look, this was software. You bought software. So, and I said, you're right. I bought software. That's what I understood. It's just that when I first originally acquired it on Ether Delta, it went from, I think it lost 95% of its value in a day. And I freaked out, and I reached out to him, and he wrote back to me and said, hey, man, this is what we agreed to. This is where you knew what you were doing. I said, no, you're right. I did. And I'm not going to say another word. So Reggie and I, we talk on social media, but we haven't done a whole lot together. Not yet.
Okay. So back to where we just were,
Okay, go ahead.
so let's talk about money. You were talking about gold and silver and
Yes.
how you work, with Veritasium, and you testify with the SEC about that, and they were
Yes.
bringing forward. Okay. So now the future of money, what is your prediction on the future of money, and where are we, if you could zoom out, from a big picture perspective on, that great book that you mentioned, a 1,000-page book, like where are we? How many years out are we before this stuff comes out?
We are at right now what I consider to be the death of most fiat currencies. All fiat currencies eventually go to zero. And if you go and look and read the history books,
Yeah.
they all go to zero.
Yeah, we can agree on that. But
Yeah,
where
the
are
dollar,
we? Are we at like death this year, 20 years from now? Where are we at timeline wise?
So the dollar is overdue for its death in the Kondratiev cycle and the waves. And I think we're experiencing it now with the CBDC and with, the Federal Reserve, the trillions of dollars, and what are we up to 100 trillion or whatever? Like that's unsustainable. You've got Venezuela that, went, hyperinflation. Weimar Republic did hyperinflation back in the 20s in Germany. That looks like where we might be headed to, like, because you never know, is it deflation or hyperinflation or both or stagflation? It's a game that's being played. I think we're headed for hyperinflation. I think it's coming now. The numbers aren't really reporting it the way it should be. But if you just try and go buy commodities, milk or whatever, and the price of cars, the price of homes, real estate, that's my bailiwick. That's how I've made money is, when the values come crashing down, I go into the counties and get the assessment reduced and save my clients money. We've always done, we take a percentage of what we save. So we don't bill our clients anything until you either get a refund or a reduced tax bill. That's how I've made my
Yeah. So back to the money side. Now, you think that we're getting closer and closer to this hyperinflationary point? I mean, people have been talking about it for as long as I can remember. So, there are some compelling things I've heard who study this stuff. People like Jim Willie, who really seem to know the financial market inside and out. I mean, so you think we're closer on this year, or we're still years out?
No, I think we're real close. And I've, in addition to Cliff High, I followed like about a number of I followed Elliott Wave for years. I followed Jim Rickards and several others. There's a couple other guys that do some very nice newsletters and talk about. One guy does a thing called Chaos Stan. I think his name is Marbury, and I followed his. So a lot of these very smart, intelligent people that have built their livelihood on advising others over time. I've read all of those. So I kind of have an amalgamation of people that I follow and that I've read for years that have helped form my financial basis of what I do. So I'm kind of, like they say, they stand on the shoulders of others. I don't really create anything. I just kind of watch what everyone does and just do my own thing.
So with your assessment and your background and all this information that you've consumed, so it sounds like we're getting pretty close to this point. If we do get to that point, are people gonna? What's your prediction that will happen? Are we going to switch over to a digital money and with
I've
Bitcoin?
always been known as a survivalist. Actually, the two homes that I've owned and built and sold, and I sold them at the peak. I just sold a home here in Poway with my wife about a year and a half ago at the peak, and it was completely off grid. It was, I'm like a Y2K survivalist. I believe water, food, a place. If chaos happens, you need to be prepared. And I've always been that way. People think I'm a nut because, I have storage and, I have gas masks. I mean, I'm just one of those guys that did it years ago, and I've kind of saved that stuff.
All right, so we never know, but you think we're going to go into a Bitcoin where people are going to start using Bitcoin, or is it going to be gold and silver, or is it going to be a combination of both, or is it going to be Federal Reserve notes are going to be staying around for?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
do you know?
I mean, no, no one really knows until it doesn't. I'm surprised. I mean, I started preparing for this back in 1999, and we're now 24 years removed from that. I'm seeing house prices that no one ever would have guessed. But then who would have ever guessed quantitative easing, and that, all the companies, all the countries around the world would all be coming together to create what, a digital currency for the world? Like, I mean, look at the Time magazine article, where it had that Phoenix from what, 1998 with the Bitcoin moniker on it.
So, but let's talk about that just briefly. I mean, is there is there even any digital currency other than Bitcoin that is even technically possible that could actually work? I mean, I hear all this stuff about, XRP and Ripple is the greatest thing ever, and I just don't see any actual adoption other than people going price high, talking about price. I
So
don't see
Ripple
any
was one of the
adoption.
first ones that I bought. I own Ripple. It was the banker's coin, and it's the Swift was going to be replaced. I bought it. But I agree with you. I don't think Ripple has any utility. But
Yeah.
if they do replace Swift and they do use Ripple,
Could they use, I guess that's a better question, or, could it be used? I guess is the
I
question.
think it could. And then you have the offshoot of that, which is Stellar Lumens, right? And which is just another fork into that. And so I acquired a whole bunch. I think I acquired 10 times more Stellar Lumens than Ripple. And that took off for one point, but now it's back. So
it's possible these things could be used. We're not certain.
no one knows. I mean, like, could Bitcoin Cash take off? Could
Well, I
it
mean,
be?
I'm just talking about the adoption side, because it
Yeah,
seems like I'm really trying to look at this from a practical side, because I got people really don't seem to understand. I mean, there's so many red flags with the Ripple, with the whole Jed McCaleb
right.
involvement, and
Yeah, it seems the
I
deeper you
mean,
go into some of these coins, you come across people with questionable pasts when it
yeah,
comes
I
to
mean, it
children.
doesn't mean it's a bad thing, but I mean, he started Mount Gox. I mean, yeah, he was gone before Mount Gox crashed, but now he's onto this Stellar and Ripple
Yeah, I was
and
around for that whole
XRP.
Mt. Gox thing.
You
I,
were.
yeah,
I mean, so it's like when that all happened, but then when Jed McCaleb, he starts this, and it looks like it's just issued by by the guy. I mean, all the guys who Roger Ver and Jed McCaleb and these guys who were there at the beginning, they all accumulated billions. They got it first, and then it went out there to the public, and then the public started getting it.
I
So,
just saw a tweet that was talking about Ripple and well, no, I'm sorry, even more Ethereum. Ethereum is, with Vitalik Buterin and stuff, who was really going to build on Bitcoin originally, but then built his own. There's some question now about whether or not they're going to be in trouble as a security and what money they make. I mean, I just saw a tweet on that last night.
it sure makes sense, that I actually want to do a video here shortly about a guy who I believe should be, I can't remember his name. He was the one pumping Terra to all the people like me. He was this investment guy, financial guy, billionaire guy. What's his name? Anyways, I will do a separate video on him. I really believe this guy should be indicted with the entire Do Kwon. What's his name really quick? Oh yeah. Novogratz. God bless him.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Suckers like me, whoa, Novogratz, he said all this, and
Well,
we
you
went
didn't
for
know.
it.
Like,
I didn't
know
know.
either,
I didn't know.
was,
I mean, whatever.
I
But
was originally for segregated witness until I found
yeah,
it cut the chain of signatures, and then you lost the whole purpose of Bitcoin, which is a ledger. So if you
yeah,
don't have identity and you cut the identity from one to the next, and for the saving a little bit of space, it made perfect sense to me that that is totally invalid.
yeah. Back to Ethereum though, and these other possible legal proceedings that could happen.
Yeah.
The thing about Ethereum, we don't know if they haven't been indicted, but or yet the SEC hasn't brought any charges yet. But let's say the one that does look like it's going to go back is the Ripple ruling. That's in the appeals court. Looks like
Okay.
a bad ruling. It looks like a very bad ruling.
Can
And
you educate me? I don't even know what the ruling was, to be honest.
it's not a security.
Oh,
That's what
that's
the
what I remember
district
that now.
court said. It wasn't a security.
Yeah,
So,
it will be. It's a security.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, they're all securities. The only one that's not a security is the original Bitcoin, because it was put out for 90 days before anyone, like, he issued anything. There's only one issuer. He's gonna, in my opinion, he's probably gonna prove it in court. I mean, the guy's he's
He
too
gave notice
smart.
and opportunity for anyone and everyone to start the protocol for 90 days. So that means that there's no central point of control.
That's right.
It really is not any. And then the creator was he left the project. So it was completely on its own. Like, it's not just one guy pulling all the strings.
Right.
And he mined what he got. He didn't
Yes.
just get that. Like,
He if you watch his early stuff, he talks about the 20 computers he had out at his farm or whatever, and all the problems he had, and it's fascinating. So did you ever watch The Theory of Bitcoin with him and Ryan Charles?
Oh, I've tried. It's, I really, hats off to that. I've tried to watch some of it. It's so long. I mean, it's amazingly brilliant.
I've watched it all. I actually worked with Ryan Charles way back in the day.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
On
Yeah.
what?
So I used his platform. I used Money Button.
Yours? Oh, Money Button.
Yeah, I used Money Button, and I put a lot of stuff in, and I actually communicated with Ryan, and I watched a lot of his videos
Me
where,
too.
he was eating nothing but steak, and he talking about, I think he compared to Craig Wright to Jesus in one of his videos. It's fascinating if you've been around.
I watched Ryan. I mean, I'm from San Francisco. I watched Ryan starting in 2017, and that's how I followed everything that was going on with Bitcoin, was his reports. I never got a chance to meet the guy, but I have a lot of respect for him, so.
I think you and I both in 17 were doing similar things. We were both looking at the Cliff High. We were looking at the ERC. We were doing the ICOs, which was the Wild Wild West,
Yep.
But as long as you followed the law, which the IRS didn't even really publish much. I just knew you got to keep good records, and you have to pay your taxes. And I use token tax, and I've done all that. So all that's been documented, because I'm a documented guy. I'm a numbers guy by trade. So, and I paid a fortune in taxes as I sold a lot of the Bitcoin to fund the company or do what I needed to do.
Mm-hmm. Nice. All right. So it sounds like we covered a lot of ground. Now,
Yep.
I'm wondering if we could go, let's see, we got just like if we got about say 10 minutes left here, yeah, I actually have we started about 10 or 13 minutes left at the most. So actually, yeah, about 10 minutes. So we've got where we going, where we've been, where we are now, where we're going. I mean, I don't want to give people advice. I don't want to give people advice
Right.
on where things are going and where they are. People need to really, that's why I always say everyone should get one Bitcoin SV.
Yes.
Having one is I think it'd be silly not to at this point. And if you got all your money in BTC, you got to diversify
So
because
given
there's,
I've given away so many BSV once I found out, and like I would help people set up either through hand cash or CentB or whatever. And CentB had a lot of growing pains, still
yeah.
does.
How do
But
people get started? How have you told people, that's been a challenge for me is people who are not in this. How do you direct a new person to, where they start? Because it's
and that's tough because I'm a golfer. I'm very athletic, so I played a lot of golf. So all of my friends, I've been telling them for years when to get in and out of real estate and then to buy Bitcoin. And I used to, they all think I'm crazy. But what eventually is I kind of had to do it for them. I had to help them download it and do this 12 words and come up with a password. And I've done all that. And I used to actually have it in a phone where I would save their words for them because people don't do that stuff,
mm,
right? And so I stopped doing that, right? If people are interested, they can do it for themselves. If they ask me, I'll help get them there. But if you start doing it for everyone else, they don't really. I did it for my children. I did it for my
no,
friends.
no, I'm not going to keep people's words. I have friends that have asked me that. I said, I'm not going to be,
No.
responsible for your secret keys. That's just
Well, and
the,
now the words are even in back in the day. By the way, I did one of the first cold wallets, like one of the first in the world with my IT guy. We went and got a computer that never saw the internet, and we took a certain number and we downloaded the protocol and we printed out a cold wallet and then dumped some Bitcoin in there, and then I laminated it and put it away, and it never saw those Bitcoin never saw the light of day, never saw the internet ever. So I was one of the first in the world, I think, to do a hardware cold wallet.
hmm, fascinating.
Yeah.
So that's a subject we got to learn more about. We should probably discuss on how that actually works. That's a complicated subject right there.
Yeah.
Cold wallets.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's the ultimate safety. But like you said in your recent thing, if the BTC chain stops mining, because miners are the whole thing, if they aren't allowed to mine, and there's only, like Craig Wright says, what, 20 miners or 20 nodes, that nodes are not
yeah,
people
it's right.
who
Is it about
verify.
20 nodes? It's less than 20, right?
Yes, there's only and ultimately it's going to be farms, maybe 5 or 6 in the world, be in Greenland, wherever they're at. So this whole idea, and I remember Tone Vays, I followed Tone Vays and all of his up and downs. I was never a trader, but you always trade a little. And all these people who they've just swallowed the BTC narrative, and that's what they do. And it's
Yeah.
hard to overcome that and even Calvin Ayre says that BTC is going to have a place at the table. But if the courts say no and they are not allowed to mine, it's over. I agree with you.
Yeah, that's the thing that we can't say. There's a worst case scenario for BTC that people have to, if they're holding it, they just have to swallow the risk that they're involved in. Because I talk about like recently is the Luna. You had a chance to sell out. I was in it. I saw it crashing. It went down. All of a sudden, it's 20 cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
I mean, if the court orders that you can't use BTC anymore and these nodes don't do it, and it will just stop mining. Could just stop mining blocks.
It'd be
Right.
over. And,
It'd
and,
be
and
over.
like you said, it wouldn't, you have nowhere to sell it. You have nothing.
Yeah. There's no selling. Well, I'll just take a loss. There's no loss. It's over, so
Yeah. And I have a certain amount of BSV, a pretty substantial amount that I put on one of the phones. And the someone who was custodying it for me didn't put the right words in. So that's kind of gone. It's not gone. Now I know that you can probably get a ledger through a court and get that back because I paid for it with my money. And I'm working with the the owner of the app to try and get that money back. But it's a substantial amount that's just sitting out there in the ether that, I don't have access to right now.
And because you lost the words, you lost the
Yeah,
phone.
the words where it's the way I explain it to people is if you have a magnetic card to get into your room, let's say at a Best Western, and you have your valuables in the room, the card is what gets you in, but it's programmable. You go to the front desk so if you lose that card, have you lost your valuables in the room? No, they're still in the room, but your access to the room is controlled by the card. And so unless you go to the front desk and get the card reprogrammed, you don't get your valuables.
So did
That's
you
what,
lose your words?
so I didn't lose my words, but what happened is we used the wrong words and we upset the wallet. So now the wallet was now created with a password and then a handle. There was no handle when I first created it. So every time you create a handle now, you get a whole new wallet. So it's a real mess because, if you've got a 4-digit code that you put and with multiple handles, you might need a white hacker to track that down. And that's where I'm at right now. I might need to get a white hacker to find out where that stuff is.
Mm,
So it's
wow.
very complicated, but it is what it is.
So, in closing here, what is wrong, or I guess, what would you say the people who are following BTC, what are they missing, and or are they missing something? Because it
Yeah,
seems
they're
to be
missing
like,
truth. They're missing truth.
okay,
The truth of what Bitcoin originally was. It's in the white paper. It's electrical. It's digital cash, right? It wasn't meant to hoodle or hodl, as Craig Wright says, although we can do that, right? And it's just the money is just the first application for Bitcoin. It's just the first thing that everyone centers around. They focus around money, the ability, what can I buy with it? That's what my wife said to me. What can I buy with it? Well, in the original days, I said, well, nothing yet. But then I started buying things and now, especially with Centby, they have a great market where you can go in and buy all kinds of gift cards. And, so it's starting to get where you can buy things. And I think that's where once Bitcoin passes that threshold where now people, especially the younger people, are using it to buy things like in Africa and all these other places, then now you get the wheels, the motor is taking off. And we're at the point now, like the refrigerator was an ice box first. Now your refrigerator will do it, practically make you dinner, right?
yeah. Yeah, it's in a fascinating time right here, Michael. Well, this is really good. So I greatly appreciate it. Is there any last things that you wanted to comment on before we close? We're money. I mean, future of Bitcoin, where we are, where we've been. You've got so much experience from seeing the internet birth, being a part of it with software,
Yeah.
seeing the actual HTTP becoming the dominant protocol.
Yeah.
I mean, what can you share with us in the way of your wisdom for
So what
what
I'm
are
going to do is I'm going to go back to my philosophy, and in the introduction of the philosophy, it basically finishes the author with there's two things in life that everyone needs to do, and it's simple. There's what to do and what not to do, and your conscience tells you what to do, and it speaks as no. If you're about to do something wrong, your conscience will say no, and if you do it anyway, okay, you've got consequences. So I like to focus on that. So my last thing is what to do and do it to the best of your ability, and what not to do and try not to do that. That's the best thing that I can say. And that's what I've been trying to do. So my goal, my personal goal, is to eventually bring that thinking and destiny knowledge through Bitcoin, right? Which, by the way, Cliff High is one of the one he talks. He's the only one I ever saw that also talked thinking and destiny in some of his stuff, which is what led me to Cliff High when I first started seeing him. So that's how I'd like to leave it with, just do the right thing if you can.
thinking in destiny?
Yeah.
So it's a book that everyone can read.
Yeah, they can find it at thewordfoundation.org. Matter of fact, they give it out to free. They often give it to prisoners who, when you're in prison and they give it to you. So it's just a great book. But it's a 1,000-page read. It's the manual of life, in my opinion.
Hmm.
It's like the
Well,
Bhagavad Gita or all that kind of stuff.
yeah, this is very insightful. I would like to have you come back and do another call again, and definitely answer some questions I have about property tax. That would be a fascinating subject.
I'd
So
be happy to. Yeah, whatever, however you want to do it, just call me up and I look forward to it. Like I said, this is my initial podcast. I've kind of been on the sidelines for a long time. And now that I'm coming back, it's like, I might be down. I'm reached out to the people that are having their Anarchapulco thing this year. And the
Jeff
theme,
Berwick, is
Jeff
that,
Berwick, yeah, I
yeah,
met him personally a couple times when I was down there. And I talked about even buying stuff down in Anarchapulco one time, or Acapulco. Um, and they're having, and the theme this year, I think it's recovery, like for people who have been, you know, addicts or whatever. It's a recovery theme. I can't remember what it's called, but it's a recovery theme.
Michael, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording. All right. And we'll see you next time. Thank you again.
Gavin, keep up the great work. I love your videos. Every one of them is really nice.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm going to